you believe in democracy? It's a very weird question, although I feel like I've been asked it quite a few times. And there's a famous saying by, I think it's Winston Churchill, who says democracy is the worst form of government, dot, 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 except all those other forms. During the pandemic, I managed to actually have quite a lot of meetings where I got to speak to people in real life, face to face, about OHM's plan, about the plan for system change. How are we going to change our government, change our political system so that South Africa can get better and stronger? And I always interweaved democracy into that conversation. I believe that democracy is important. I believe that democratic principles are important in government. And it seems that wherever I went, there were always a small group of people who said they don't believe in democracy. Democracy can never work. Democracy does not work, or a whole host of other, I suppose, fallacies. So I want to dedicate the next few minutes to dissecting democracy just a little bit. So what is democracy? Democracy, if you look at the root words, basically means people power. So people in power, or people having influence over those in power. And I think it's important to make a distinction that democracy itself is not a system. It is basically a principle you can incorporate into various types of systems. But if you don't like democracy, just let me know in the comments. What would you propose? Let me know what you think would be a better alternative to people having a say in their government affairs. So if you look at let's go back to the root word, people in power. Our democracy, or any democracy, basically insinuates that the people of a state or nation has some degree of influence in government. And the degree of influence in government will be determined by the constitution, by the institutions, by the systems that are put in place. But the idea is that there's a back and forth between citizen and between government. How is that a bad thing? Surely that's a good thing. I think one of the alternatives that came my way was anarchy as an alternative, but I see anarchy as a kind of form of utopia because it relies for there not to be carnage in society. An anarchist society relies on the majority, the vast majority of the population being able to self-govern. And if you look at the history of the world, very few people can self-govern. Therefore, anarchism is a utopian principle, impractical, nice to think about, wonderful to idolize, but essentially impossible and impractical. So what's next? Then you've got tyranny, where you are ruled either by a single ruler or a group of people, and you are the ruler's subject. No one really wants that. That was common back in the day, but no one really wants that anymore. I like to think we've progressed past that. And then another system would probably be oligarchy, where an elite, wealthy elite, or powerful elites rule the state. And I would say that's actually where we are. So interestingly, we've got a constitution which speaks about democracy in it, which allows its citizens to vote and participate in public participation processes and all the rest. But the multi-party system enables the rule of funders of those political parties. So there's a little bit of a loophole there that undoes the democracy the Constitution claims to allow or foster. And that's why the system needs to change at a constitutional level. So when it comes to creating a new system for the country, or for any country, the way I see it, OHM's blueprint, hopefully, with a couple of edits and tweaks, will be able to be replicated across the world, in any country, any nation, any community, really. So the idea with the OHM system, specifically with democracy, is that we need to improve how citizens and the government interacts. Especially if you look at how it is now, there is no real accountability between citizen and public representative, and we plan on changing that completely. You can read our manifesto, ohm.org.za. On the front page, there's a button, click it, manifesto, and we highlight the structural changes that will take place. All very important. Lots of accountability mechanisms, which are extremely important, which are missing currently. But the idea is that we improve our democracy here in South Africa and also in the rest of the world. We want to have more of a say over how we are governed, not ruled, governed. And this is where I think our public representatives get it mixed up. They act as if they are ruling over us, and that's not how this works. They're supposed to govern. They're supposed to make sure there are things in place that make society function, infrastructure, construction, an economy that is free and open. And unfortunately, the mindset is, I've got power, therefore I need to rule over you. So that needs to be transformed completely. And how do we transform that? Through processes, through changing the system and improving the processes within those systems. As we are preparing for the local government elections, it's becoming more and more clear to me how little say residents, specifically in local government elections, have over what happens in the municipality, which is a huge problem. People contact me from all over the country, concerned about things that are happening, anything from environmental issues to infrastructure issues to corruption. And it's terrible. And there's developments happening, and suburbs are changing before people's eyes. People are being priced out of their homes in certain cities, especially along the coast, cities and towns. So there are many multiple problems. And on that note, please comment what your major problems are in your local municipality. Please state your local municipality and the problems that you're facing. We're trying to create a kind of directory of government failure, and we'd love to have your input on that. But essentially, the point I'm trying to put across is that the average citizen has no power, no say over what happens to their municipality. And there's no communication from our public reps. Not only do they not get our input, they hardly ever let us know what's happening either, and that's one of their primary jobs. So we have a huge crisis, an accountability crisis, a system design problem, and we are trying to fix that. And it would be great if you can join. And you can go to our website, like I said before, ohm.org.za, and sign up. Either sign up to our newsletter to get more info or sign up as a member to actually get involved. But back to democracy, there is an elephant in the room when it comes to democracy. And also with regards to what we're trying to do with system change. So I've really tried to create a system that will enable or foster the progress of humanity. And one has to think of so many different things, especially human nature and human psychology, of course. And there is no perfect system at all. We can try and philosophize about it and try create the most ideal perfect system that we can think of, but it will never be perfect as soon as humans get their hands on the system. And this is where the problem lies. And the one thing is, the most important part of system change is basically how citizens react or respond. So I'll get to that in a minute. Our current system, as an example, with the multi-party whatevers, is far from perfect. It is a terrible system. It's not an empowering system. However, with better people in leadership positions, and I use that word with trepidation, leadership, with better people in leadership positions, it would yield better results to a degree. And when I say better people, I mean people with ethics. We need ethical leadership. All those human values that help humanity progress have kind of gone out the window. I half blame the modern, if you can call it that, modern education system, but it's more than that. It's a lot of things. But I think the education system definitely catalyzes the destruction of society. So even with a perfect system, a very intentionally designed, well-crafted system where people have thought of every possibility, people can still corrupt it. People can always abuse power. So you have to limit what people have power over, and this is why I always stress that national government has to be very limited in what it's able to do. National government should not have any control over how people live their lives. national government needs to put its focus towards protecting the borders, making the country strong, dealing with international relations and so forth. And everything else needs to be handled at a much more local level, that is proper decentralization. But without going into the details of the system change itself, it is important that we realize one thing, that we have allowed rotten leaders to hold power for so long. We've allowed it through our actions. For some reason, we have entered a paradigm where it's almost become popular to accept mediocrity and even laugh at and accept sketchiness in leadership positions. It's a huge problem. We've also been lulled into a reality where we rather keep the peace and we rather keep our opinions to ourselves, and we don't rock the boat, and we're told not to speak about hectic topics like religion and politics. And as a result, humanity has been silenced. It is so important that people put their ideas forward out there everywhere they go, within their families, within their communities, within wherever they have influence. And we've kind of stopped doing that. And that is a huge problem. When you live in a democracy, you need to feed the public square. So individuals sharing their thoughts and opinions freely, openly, without hesitation or fear is probably one of the most important steps to recreating the spirit of democracy in society. And that can start immediately. That's a small step everyone can take right now to start recreating democracy in society. And hopefully we can do that. Have intriguing conversations about things that are actually happening. I think that probably a large thing with regards to modern society is that we're so distracted with entertainment and comfort and we're so stressed that we haven't got the mental capacity to worry about ideals and ethics and political participation processes. We're too caught up in our own realities that we've completely abandoned our civic responsibilities and civic duties, which all of us have. You cannot exist in a system that claims to have democratic principles without being an active citizen. And this is the main points I want to get to, is that no system will work if you want a democratic system. If you want tyranny, fine. You don't have to listen. If you want to stay in an oligarchical system, that's fine. You don't have to listen. But if you do want a system where people have some kind of control over their lives, then it's important that we take control of things. And we do that by active participation. So one can argue, why do we have such bad, unethical leadership? Well, voters have allowed it to happen. And so have non-voters. Non-voters have also allowed it to happen. And so I'll digress a little bit, because as soon as I mention the voting situation, here's a few other comments I get. If voting was effective, they wouldn't let us do it, as an example of what's been said to me about voting. But with currently, as long as voting is still analog and not digital, it's actually a really beautiful process. I've been part of the counting process myself. Yes, there have been discrepancies before. I won't comment on that, but if there are enough volunteers to observe the counting process across the whole country in all over 20,000 voting stations, then no one can cook the books. So our participation is what is necessary to hold the leaders accountable in whatever system that exists. And that has been absent for so long. So yes, it's fun. I enjoy creating and discussing with other people how to create a system that is much better than the current one that can carry humanity over into the next phase of its existence. However, none of that matters unless we look at ourselves. OM's slogan from the early days is Liberate South Africa, or Liberate SA for short. And we want to achieve liberation, the liberation of South Africa, without a revolution. We want to achieve liberation through system change. And we achieve system change through constitutional reform. But what we actually need to do, and this is the terrifying part, this is so scary. We can't achieve, this country will never achieve liberation if we ourselves are not liberated. And we need to be liberated mentally and emotionally and all the rest. And until we do that work, we'll always be stuck in this paradigm where corrupt people have power over us. So the path to freedom, or the long walk to freedom, as Mandela called it in his book, ultimately is self-liberation to a degree, which should result in feeling a duty or calling towards civic responsibility in whatever shape or form. And we need to start moving in that direction. Beyond being a keyboard warrior, beyond complaining, beyond just moaning about the current party in charge or the current system, we need to actually be more active. And just like I said before, voicing your opinion, talking about what matters to you, and getting involved in public participation processes, volunteering where you can to help with political processes, such as counting the voting. And if you'd like to do that for OM, let us know in the comments. We'll gladly have more volunteers. It'd be great if we can have volunteers in all the municipalities that we are contesting. So there's no real final conclusion. I've put it out there into the universe, this manifesto that highlights the structural and political changes that need to take place in South Africa. And I've been busy for a while now working on OM's foundational philosophy document, and some of that I've posted on Substack, not all of it, just some of it. It's going to be a long one. And in that document, I explore what civilization needs in order to function and progress and prosper, essentially. And OM has 6 principles, which is the framework for everything that we do. But unfortunately, that's meeting you halfway. You have to meet the plan halfway as well. And to know that the future of the country and the future of the world and the future of humanity and the quality of what humanity is going to look like in the future relies on the actions of so many individuals is very scary. But that's what we have to do. And it starts with you and it starts with me. It's that simple. And from a civic standpoint, forget system change for a second. What do we need to be in order to be effective in any democracy, to hold leaders accountable? I think firstly, we can't be reliant on the state. So there needs to be a degree of independence, or what we like to call independence from government and corporate control, which is a sort of form of self-reliance, not needing the government or corporations for your most basic needs, so that that power and control cannot be exerted over you. You need to be skilled, so you need to be able to look after your most basic needs in terms of emergencies or food or water or whatever. You need to have the skills and the knowledge to do that for yourself. And then you also need to be resilient. And if you can combine those values, that's the starting point. That's why we have a group on Facebook called Independent Living, saying goodbye to government and corporate control. People share their journey. A lot of people, for instance, try grow their own food or get out of debt or various things to not be so reliant, to try and not be at the mercy of some other entity. That's the first step to being free. It's really a philosophy. And because, democracy comes from the ancient Greeks, I think the Spartans got it right. Although they professed to despise democracy to a degree, they did have democratic elements in their system. But on the other hand, I really appreciate how they lived. Well, minus the weird ancient stuff that many ancient societies were subject to, the philosophy, I see them as living a kind of lifestyle that makes them torture-proof. And if you can live a kind of lifestyle that makes you torture-proof, then no government can exert control or power over you. And we are so far from that. So we really have to take a look at ourselves and change our behavior so that we can be in control of our lives, and those in leadership positions who are not ethical, who do not have a moral backbone, who don't have integrity, they physically cannot exist in those positions anymore. It's not only going to take a framework that replaces the current system and governance structure, it's going to take our actions.